suffered an immense loss with the passing of Dr. Roger Luncheon. Dr. Roger Luncheon was a central figure in the People's Progressive Party and every single PPP civic government over the past several decades. He was involved and deeply involved in almost all the critical decisions made by the party over that period, and he was central to the implementation of the government's agenda. And he served several presidents in a very important role as head of the Presidential Secretariat, Secretary to the Cabinet, and Secretary to the Defense Board, several roles. And even in the Irfanali's government, he was an advisor to the Cabinet and also a member of the Cabinet. Dr. Roger Luncheon was a distinguished doctor, and I recall many times I will go by his office, or he'd come over to see me when I was president, and I'd see a number of people coming to the office of the president, and he would be dispensing medicine too, giving them some medicine there, even at the office of the president. They had great faith in him. One time, one person, an elderly woman, came to see me at the office, and she had a person who was ill in the family. And I asked Roger to come over to meet with her. And Roger said to her, I would like to tell you something better, but the boy will not make it. And she started crying. She was inconsolable. And I said to her, you know, we'd still try to see what we can do to help. And she said, no, once he says that, I have great faith in him. That's it. Because we shouldn't try anymore. That is how much trust she had in his ability as a doctor. He was very personable, and he helped scores of people in this country in a quiet way, without often shunning the publicity, and for which he would be remembered affectionately by large numbers of Guyanese. For those of us in the PPP, he was an embodiment of commitment and struggle. He returned to Guyana, and as I said before, he was a brilliant doctor. He could have easily gone to the government at that time and probably would have done extremely well with them. And those were the dark days of undemocratic rule. But he chose to join the People's Progressive Party in a period when it seemed as though we would never be able to get into office. It was a contentious period, and the PNC at that time controlled all the coercive branches of government, and they used them to the maximum. From jailing opponents, you had people who were killed in that period, Father Dark and the others, mass protests that were brutally put down. in the same era as Dr. Walter Rodney, who lost his life, was killed by the PNC, as the COI concluded. And Roger, coming back to Guyana, chose to join up with the People's Progressive Party in that period. And he's remained faithful to the party, its ideals throughout. So, and as I said before, he has been a central figure for us when the Patriotic Coalition for Democracy had discussions about a presidential candidate, and they did not want Dr. Jagan to run at that time. The party chose Roger Luncheon to be the presidential candidate in that period. It was the WPA and the others who rejected him, saying, basically implying he was too pro-PPP and too ideological. Roger Luncheon would be long remembered in the party. He has inspired a slew of people. I just changed my WhatsApp profile in about 2 hours ago and posted a picture of Roger. And in less than the 2 hours that I did, I've had about maybe 300 WhatsApp messages of people coming in from the party, leaders, young people, talking about how he touched their lives personally. And so we want to thank all of the people who have sent kind words of condolences to his family and to the party. We appreciate that. We've been in discussion with the family, and it would be about 3 weeks before the funeral will take place. They have a number of people who are abroad that they wish to come in to attend the funeral, and so you will be notified about that in the future. The party will have a number of activities at which people will be able to express their views on Roger Luncheon. I was aghast just now to see a statement coming out of APNU. And seemingly to speak about Roger's commitment and everything else and how he was respected. But it's vile, as though they don't have a sense of occasion. It's vile to say in the statement here, and they were speaking about extrajudicial killing, that this machine, which appeared during the tenure of President Bharrat Jagdeo, consumed the lives of over 400 young men, and Dr. Luncheon is not without some responsibility for this unprecedented violence in our post-independence history. Now, APNU, the PNC, is blaming Roger Luncheon for the spate of killings that took place in that period, in the early 2000s, as though it was Roger Luncheon who gave refuge to the 5 escapees from the prison, who found solace in the arms of the PNC and many of their leaders. And that role has been documented by several persons. And the connection between the 5 escapees and the gang that they created that wreaked havoc on the police and innocent people in this country, killing many of them in Bartica and Agricola and Lusitania, etc. It's been well documented. UC Quayana, who is no lover of the PPP, documented that link between APNU and the criminal gang that they protected in Buxton. And they're seeking to blame Roger Luncheon for that in a statement on his passing. And I notice now they have said consumed the lives of over 400 young men. But you recall they used to say 400 young black men in the past. And then they used to say 1,400, the Kool-Aid gang. They used to say that. But that, I think they're a bit abashed now, shame. They may be a bit embarrassed to repeat this, because in that Starbuck News expose, it pointed out that it was the 400 people were killed or so, and in fact it's less, significantly less than the 400, but there were people of every race. There were policemen included that the criminals killed in that period too, over the extended period, and including the victims of their criminals, nurtured by APNU. And today they're blaming, in a statement on his passing, they're blaming Roger Luncheon for that. And secondly, they said that Roger Luncheon was the cause, he caused the PNC to suspend the dialogue with the PPP. Now, Roger Luncheon had to be an extremely powerful man to control the PNC leadership, to cause them to suspend a dialogue with the PPP. He had to be extremely powerful. He controlled the APNU leadership. The facts are very different. The facts are very, very different. And if you if you go back and look at that history, you will see that they had no interest whatsoever in engaging. And we've made it clear that the basis of any engagement between the two parties must be on the basis, must be one, a commitment to democracy, and two, a banishment of racism from their political toolkit. And so I'm very, very disappointed that they will issue a statement, and then in that statement, try on his passing, try to vilify him. And their Kool-Aid gang has been spreading another rumor that somehow when Roger had the difficulties over the past several months. Now, Roger has been ailing for quite a while, but throughout his ailment and the difficulties he's had, he's always showed up to work, gave of his very best. He's one of those unique characters. And so recently he had additional challenges, and they made it seem that we abandoned Roger Luncheon in the difficult times, so that he had no income and all of that. Now, as I said before, until the day he passed away, Roger Luncheon was a member of the Central Committee, was an executive member of the party, he was a member of the cabinet, he received a salary as a member of the cabinet, he received his pension as HPS, he had a driver assigned to him and a vehicle assigned to him, he had a staff an office in the office of the president with several staff assigned to him, and that was until the day he died. So I see the Kool-Aid gang being spreading that we abandoned Roger, and there are lots of people who believe this and circulate that. That's what APNU has identified, a Kool-Aid gang to fool their own people. So much more, as I said before, much more you'll be notified about it, the final arrangements, etc. Now I'm talking about the Kool-Aid gang again and misleading their supporters. I had a very interesting conversation over the last couple of days ago with some people who are working with us now, campaigning and stuff. They've come across to the PPP, but who are in the thick of things in 2020 when the APNU was trying to steal the elections. And so it was interesting for me to get an insider's perspective on what was happening in that camp at that time. And the person said to me, now these are reasonably intelligent people. And the person said to me, in fact it's more than one, they said to me that that they were fed with a number of the lies again. And like, oh, we need to celebrate, the PPP is trying to steal the elections, so let's go on the railway embankment to do something. The PPP took money from businessmen, and that's why they're so anxious to win the elections. A whole range of lies, and it was so interesting for me as an outsider to hear the lies, and they confessed they actually believed the lies. And this Kool-Aid is a very potent thing. And it is, if they can believe those lies as intelligent people, we have a big task with unseating a lot of this mindset, because it's a particular mindset. I thought it's extremely stupid people who would believe APNU when they lie all the time. But smart people do too, because they're told that the PPP is evil. And so they're prone to believe anything that they're told. Now, in keeping with that mindset, yesterday we had a protest in front of GCOM that we stole the 2020 elections. Now, who could, in their any reasonable person in this country, unless you really need to have like surgery to remove a dead part of your brain, believe that APNU won the 2020 elections? Up to now, their SOPs disappeared that show they won. The commission of inquiry was there, they didn't show up, etc. But they're protesting it. And that protest is for the gullible ones. As I said, they're drinking the Kool-Aid. Oh, we won it, the PPP stole the elections. So this is the mindset, and it says clearly to us that they will continue to fool a large group of people. So consistent with that, they've appeared on several programs to talk about lack of democracy in Guyana. Somebody told me Christopher Jones was saying that on a program that this is North Korea, everything is run from Freedom House, we don't have democracy anymore, democracy died in Guyana. All of this is to obfuscate, to take away the victory, basically to remove attention from the 2020 victory of the People's Progressive Party. And yesterday was the anniversary, the third anniversary of that victory that we had to fight for. Not the victory, but the swearing in, because the victory took place 5 months prior to that. So if any North Korean tendencies manifested itself in Guyana in terms of maximum leaders, it's not just leaders who are influential that is on the North Korean model. It's a maximum leader who secludes himself away from people and start naming things after himself. So Granger never went underground. You wouldn't catch him for anything. Mingling with people, going to a community, talking to them, listening to their concerns, talking about a road project, or subjecting himself to criticism based on these community meetings. Wouldn't be caught for dead doing that. And then naming things after himself. Every old boss and both David G, they started naming after David G. So if there was any North Korean tendencies that crept into the national life, it was under APNU. What we have done, we have flattened that. The fact is that we go out a lot, people see us a lot, the president is out a lot, because we made it clear from the beginning we'll remain engaged with people. And we have gone beyond just a representative democracy where you work through leaders, almost to a participatory democracy. Very few countries in the world have the type of engagement that our leaders have at ministerial level, at the presidential level, with communities where people have it's almost a direct form of democracy. They can tell their elected leaders, you're doing something wrong, and they say that in the community meetings. They can say, you didn't fix this, we want this fixed. We don't have to go through third parties like some of the NGOs believe they are a filter for the community to come through them. You can only raise concerns through us or other groups. That is participatory democracy. So this fact, this North Korean model business crept in, and for it to come from, and talking about management of resources, this is the same Christopher Jones. Asked him about all the shows that they are putting up where money was siphoned from every one of those shows that they had funded by the government. You just have to go back to the past. We have ignored a lot of that. You know, we talk about the wheelchair, another wheelchair, the barber chair. That a story a lot that Christopher Jones got to clean up the sledge money for that. But we don't look at his role and the others in siphoning money off of these activities. So this is what, and now, heavens forbid now that a PPP person in Region 10, it used to be that we're not giving no assistance to Afro-Guyanese. Now it seems as though you have to be Afro-Guyanese and PNC to get assistance. You can't be Afro-Guyanese and PPP. And only then we will meet their standards. And then, even then, they say to the people, the government will not help. So that brings me back to Norton and the third anniversary of the People's Progressive Party in office. So Norton had a ranting statement that he just issued. And he, in the statement, he said, the Starbuck News editorial on the anniversary date encapsulated the national sentiment. That is APNU leader Aubrey Norton. And then he went on to speak. So he's referring people to he says that the Stabrook editorial captured their sentiment. It seems as though he fall out with Glenn Lal now. So now he latched on to, because he's led by his nose by Glenn Lal, and now he's latched on to the Stabrook editorial. So that let us look at this editorial for a moment. This editorial actually could have been written by Glenn Lau in the Starbuck News. It's a vile editorial. Normally, I'm a bit generous to them. But in 3 years, they found not a single, not one positive thing that the PPP has done in 3 years in government. Not a single positive thing. Everything is negative. And I suspect the reason, and they're doing this editorial, they may be losing ground to Glenn Lal with his madness. So they keep saying that. Let me just give you a few things. I'm not going to go through all of this because I know it's garbage. It's a garbage editorial. Our track record is there to be seen. We can defend it in any circumstance. We can show that it's vastly superior than anything APNU did in 5 years. We have done more in a single year for the people of this country in terms of welfare than APNU did in 5 years. And we can show that historically the PPP has always moved our country forward in every single facet of life. So I don't have to be defensive in our track record because I cannot use this press conference. It will take me days to point out all the progress we have made, and we are prepared to take that debate on any time. So let me just go to a few of the things. Approaching the 4th anniversary of the start of oil production and straddling 2 administrations, the people of this country are yet to see regulatory vigor over the petroleum industry. Despite a firm commitment 3 years ago, the government is yet to present legislation for a petroleum commission to regulate the aspects of the industry. They have not seen anything done on the regulatory side since we got into office. I have on a number of occasions sat right here and said that we have had in a short period one of the most aggressive agendas for improving the regulatory and the management framework for the oil and gas sector. We have amended the Natural Resources Fund. I do not want to once again repeat the components of it, but today it has gained international kudos because of the amendments that we made. Significant amendments that vastly enhance the transparency in the use of the resources and the receipt and accounting for those resources. 2, we said we will launch an auction moving away from this first come, first serve basis on which oil blocks were issued in the past. We've launched the auction. That auction will be closed in September, near mid-September. Thirdly, we have now drafted a new PSA. Fourthly, we are passing the Petroleum Activities Bill. Today, it's in Parliament today, the Petroleum Activity Bill. We also, 5, we have passed a local content law, which has driven over $400 million of business to local people. I can go on and on. These are all important pieces of legislation and part of the framework. We said we will look at the Petroleum Commission, but we made it clear at this point in time that no function is left unattended to because we don't have the Petroleum Commission, because the Ministry of Natural Resources now acts as the management and regulatory body. And we have strengthened capacity there. And they have seen nothing happening on the regulatory side in the last few years. Absolutely nothing. because somehow we say we'll pass a petroleum commission and we didn't. That's the editorial for you. On the environmental side, we have now passed, let me don't go to the environmental yet. On the licenses themselves, the subsequent licenses that we have issued, PIARA, etc., we have strengthened the provisions. We have made them public now. They're all listed on the website. Where APNU had them hidden, they're all on the website. Vastly strengthened licenses. On the environmental side, we have put in place, we have introduced a carbon tax. There was always a no flaring policy, but there was no mechanism to penalize the company. We introduced a carbon tax, one of the few countries in the world where you have the petroleum industry facing a carbon tax. And it's now $50 per ton of emission that if they flare or you have unsanctioned emissions. We have, in the last permit we gave, we said they have to have a capping stack here that wood can plug a well. It's a very costly thing that just in case there is a spill, that immediately that would be in the country. They didn't want to bring it in the country, that it could be deployed immediately to plug the well in case you have a blowout. And they'd have to keep a subscription abroad. We have the $600 million guarantee now that it's there in writing. The certificates are presented, and the $2 billion parent guarantee. We can argue about whether it's adequate or not, and there's a court case on this matter. But this was not there before. We have looked at higher standards for wastewater. We're building an oil response capability, an inspection capability. We're at the GRA, we're now looking at an audit capability. All of these, they haven't seen anything happening in the sector in the Starbuck News editorial on 3 years into the government. So then they moved on in the same editorial. They said that, we're not giving people enough money now, so they latched on to the very popular argument. The same people who talk about Dutch disease, and we must be careful about Dutch disease and high inflation, and took a moral high ground and would invite people to Moray House to talk about these lofty ideas. Now suddenly they want us to share out the money. But really, it's a populist way. Let me give you an idea. So they're saying that people are not feeling the benefits of the oil and gas sector enough. First of all, you have to go back to what we collected. So the first year, about $600 million was spent from the oil and gas resources last year. And this year, $1 billion is programmed to come from oil and gas. I dealt at the last press conference with the facts that it's less than 1/3 of the budget is funded from oil and gas revenue. Less than 1/3 of the entire national budget. So it's not coming in at a large magnitude. But let's look at what people get now that they didn't have in 2020, and let's calculate it. The school kids now have $8.4 billion more in this year's budget that they did not have in 2020. The pensioners increased by $13,000 from $20,000 to $33,000. When you calculate it, it's over $14 billion. So two categories getting 20-something, nearly $23 billion. 14,000 people getting part-time jobs who didn't have these jobs in 2020 nearly $10 billion. So if you calculate that, that's about $33 billion more that people are getting now from just these three initiatives, leaving out public assistance, etc., all the other things. Three initiatives, $33 billion more going that they didn't have in 2020. Then if you look at the growth in employment costs for the government, so that funds wages and salaries and everything. It was the last budget passed by APNU was $68.6 billion. This budget is $105.7 billion. So that's a $37 billion increase in low employment costs in the public service. If you add the 33 crudely put and the $37 billion, the 33 from these three initiatives and the $37 billion in growth in employment costs for the government, that's $70 billion in this year's budget for employment costs in the public sector, hiring the part-time workers, giving the children the grant, and increasing old age pension. 4 initiatives alone is $70 billion of the $200 billion budgeted this year from oil and gas money. $70 billion goes to those categories, and people are not getting back anything in this country. That's their argument. Leaving out the $5 billion for the cost of living adjustment, the foregone revenue from lower taxes, all of that stuff. I can go on. If I enumerate all the other initiatives, then you will see that this figure will even grow. But they abstract from all of this. Now, they don't want us to also build anything. They said, they have a big issue with the same editorial. The government is building the bridge across the Demerara River. No doubt it would hold that up to the electorate in 2025. That's their big worry, that we will hold it up to the electorate to win the elections. But that's what governments do. Governments work to progress people's lives with the hope that they get re-elected. What is unusual about that? What did APNU hold up to the electorate? More taxes? Taking away the joint services bonus, the children's money? What did they hold up? Stealing elections? We don't hold up those things. We're showing progress. So we must not do that bridge, because we mustn't hold that up to the electorate in 2025. So never mind that the people in these 2 regions will suffer immensely from this bridge there. Never mind you take away their development potential. Region 3 is the next most populous region than 4. You would change the lives of people. I already pointed this out. All the economic activities now that we don't have space for in Region 4 can go across to Region 3. People can bring containers. There's no difference now with landing your container on any side of a river, moving large trucks, etc. with that bridge. It will change it there. But they have a problem with that. No doubt they have a problem. Let me tell you about the other things we're spending some oil money on. So we're building a road from Crane, a 4-lane road to the bridge, and that will cost another $15 billion. From local money, 12 Guyanese contractors are working on that. Our own people working there. But what will that do to the thousands of people who live in Region 3 and people who go across the Region 2? It will change their lives. With this bridge, it will change the lives of the people, the bridge and the road, because every morning you should go and see the congestion, or in the evening there. But we must please Tabrook News and some of the others, because you mustn't do these things. Because why would you want to do this and campaign on it in 2025? The road to Diamond that will change the life and done mainly by local, 14 I think of the 17 contractors there are locals. that's costing $18 billion, all funded from the local budget. So when you add those to the $70 billion I talked from 4 other initiatives, and they still ask, where is oil money going? And I just listed a few initiatives. Forget the buying more drugs to the hospitals and stuff like that. We'll come to that in a moment. Because, so this is what we get on this editorial. Not a single thing. I can go on. It speaks here about the gas to energy project. And the same editorial, why would you want to do this? You'll be locked into a cycle outside of maybe it will cause problems to people on the West Coast. Power plants are built everywhere in the world. Gas pipelines are built everywhere in the world, including the developed countries, but it's not an issue. Some of them are built in the center of heavily populated areas, pass through major towns. But that's not a problem. Here, this editorial is very concerned. That's why I'm saying that it speaks about more like Dunlap. Oh, this power plant would lock us into a cycle of burning fossil fuel. And we must be careful because we want to ensure that we're not polluting the world. So what is the problem here? Last week, I dealt with the G20. They couldn't make a decision to phase out or phase down fossil fuel. That's the G20. If you read this week, you will see that the United Kingdom has just given out hundreds of licenses to explore for oil and gas. The same United Kingdom that was championing the cause of phasing out fossil fuel and banning coal. Last year, they gave a permit for deep coal mining in the United Kingdom. And here we must be worried that that basically that we're going to be locked into a cycle for burning fossil fuel. Frankly speaking, our commitment to net zero is one of the strongest commitments in the world. We are already doing a significant part of playing a significant role in decarbonizing the world through our forests. We are already carbon negative. We've laid this all out before. But Starbucks doesn't care. They complain about cost of living. Oh, cost of living is high. Everybody now. And it's true because we've had the pandemic, but they don't speak about the measures that we have put in place. Cheaper electricity would reduce cost of living. Cheaper cooking gas would reduce cost of living. They don't care that that project will bring in electricity prices at 50% now and cooking gas price at 50%. Oh, they're worried about our commitment to the rest of the world locking us out into a cycle. Although gas is even less carbon intensive than diesel and bunker that we're burning now. That's their concern. This editorial is filed 3-year anniversary. No doubt that Norton uses it as his he didn't need to say much. He used the editorial to do it. It's a vile editorial. So again, consistent with the Kool-Aid approach to development, they've been now spreading a rumor, and it's going on. And why the reason I want to address this is because a few doctors said to me, do you know that there are some doctors who are saying this themselves? And that's why I'm saying this Kool-Aid has resonance not only with, I thought it was extremely stupid people, but it can go into other circles too, because that's how it works. It's very pernicious, and it works in surreptitious ways. Very, so they spread it by chatting. And when you ask people one question, where did you get this from? They don't have a source, but they still spread the rumors. So there's been, recently we discovered, we had a big backlog at the Georgetown Hospital. Now let me tell you the context. First of all, when we got back into office, we had to destroy about $10 billion worth of drugs that is medical supplies, etc., that were part of, that already expired. Took us a while to clear that up and then replenish the stock. A lot of the equipment were not functioning. The labs in Georgetown Hospital, tons of things. Your COVID hospital, didn't have a single bed in it, no oxygen, nothing. So we have had an intense period of trying to fix this. Do you know that between 2015 to 2020, not a single audit was done for the Georgetown Hospital? That is their legacy. Not a single audit was done between 2015 to 2020. Just now, the management of Georgetown Hospital had to recreate the financial statements and get their vouchers to the Auditor General's office for the period 2015 to 2020. They now, last year, they submitted, for the period we've been in office, they've submitted financial statements up to 2022, last year. So this administration has had to go back now and recreate the financial statements from 2015 all the way to 2022 that are before the audit office now. So that's the first thing. That's the first thing, lack of accountability. And so I hope that some of the same people here who are talking nonsense, that they would look at that issue. That's the first thing. Secondly, they spread a rumor that we are running down the Georgetown Hospital because we want to give the private hospitals work. I know that we want to kill Georgetown Hospital, so everybody in Guyana would have to go to private hospitals. Now, it's so stupid because in the light that they have seen us announce that we are building 12 new hospitals, public hospitals around the country, at which each would have things like ultrasound, CT scanning. Every one of them will have those facilities. Nobody should believe that rumor. That's an expansion of public health care. But people still believe that. And none of the plans for any of these hospitals was in place when we took office. And we will spend about $600 million on these 12 hospitals that will transform healthcare. So in the face of that, people should not believe this, but they do believe. Secondly, are we really underfunding Georgetown Hospital? In 2019, the last budget that APNU passed, the allocation to Georgetown Hospital was $9.6 billion. This year, it's $15.6 billion. A $6 billion increase on 9. You put 6 over 9 and multiply by 100, and then you will get the percentage increase. That will give you will see how much it has increased the funding to the Georgetown Hospital. So it's a total lie, but they will go on the Kool-Aid programs, and I don't know, they have a couple of Kool-Aid people, Bench Cop and Rickford Burke and some of the others, the Kool-Aid gang. So people go on these Kool-Aid programs and make these statements. And some people drink the Kool-Aid like crazy and then repeat the stuff. Now, they may have a beef about what the government did, but let me give you an example. So we discovered you had a big backlog of ultrasound at over 2,000. And the echocardiogram, that several hundreds, nearly 1,000 of those backlog at the Georgetown Hospital. People are just flowing in to get this done with the improved services. So we're buying 3 machines to do the echo now. And we decided, the president one day convened a meeting at State House. I was at the meeting with the Minister of Health and others, the administration, with all the hospitals, Mercy, Woodland, Balwant Singh, Sheriff Davis Memorial. And we decided that they will help us clear the backlog by paying them to clear the backlog. So they were charging like 6,000 to 8,000 for ultrasound, and for the government people that we direct to these, all of these hospitals, they're charging 4,000, and now the echo they're doing for 6,000 when they were charging 12,000 to 15,000. And that has allowed us now to clear a lot of the backlog. They had extra capacity because we care about people. And we did it with all the hospitals so we could clear up the backlog for people there. That is what happened. So people drink a lot, as I said before. They Kool-Aid and they just move on these issues. Now on the Chinese landing issue, you've seen a comprehensive statement by the Minister Teixeira, and I saw a Starbrook editorial again. It wasn't such a bad one, but I want people to think back through it, go behind all of this. The only reason that this issue arose is because, first of all, the People's Progressive Party in 2006 gave our Amerindian communities, for the first time ever, in one of the few countries in the entire world, I don't know a single developed country that has done this, gave our Amerindian people in this country subsurface rights for small and medium scale mining. They had to have consent, and for large scale mining you had to get the consultations done for large scale mining. So small and medium scale mining on Amerindian title land cannot take place without the consent of the villages themselves. Prior to that, the state controlled and all subsurface rights belong to the state. So we should get credit for that. The PPP doesn't get credit for that it gave the Amerindian communities a right in 2006 that they didn't have ever before, and very few Amerindian communities got title. As a result of that, we had this issue. As a result of that. And secondly, but the editorial said we are hiding behind the matter being sub judice, and that we should read the riot plan to the police. If we find any police who've been violating the rights of the people in not just Amerindian communities, but anywhere in the country, but more particularly in this case, there'll be heavy sanctions. We don't need to read the Riot Act. We've done it many, many times before. But we're not sheltering behind the matter being sub judice. There is a CCJ decision, and we have to comply with a CCJ decision. The same people who are saying we're sheltering behind a decision of the court now, and basically implying we should ignore it, would be the ones criticizing us They ought to be the first to criticize us if we ignore a decision of the court, particularly the CCJ. But now there would be a temporary ban on mining in the communities, and hopefully that would allow us to move forward in that area. Maybe I just end there for the time being because I want to get to the questions. Thank you very much. Yes, please. The thing is that we're trying to use as many local people as possible. But if there is an absence of local people and we don't have the requisite skills, we have no alternative but to turn to the technical skills from abroad. But that's a crucial area of capacity building in the GRA that we have to work on, because that's a petroleum unit. We have a number of young people there. A number of technical people have been hired with degrees, and they've been doing a lot of training. So it's our preference to have local people, our own people work in these agencies, but if you don't have the skill, we'd have to go abroad and bring them in. Oh, yes, but it's ongoing. A lot of the communities, when you visit them, first of all, people don't have a lot of information and they're being misled. So a lot of what I'm speaking about here, where people are actually misled into believing something that is not true. And I noticed that they go very almost hysteric when I visit some communities. Like Rickford Burke, I saw him becoming hysterical here as part of the Kool-Aid gang, because it doesn't suit their narrative that we don't visit Afro-Guyanese communities, etc. So, and by the way, this is a con man. Let me just put in that piece. The con man who lives in New York, Rickford Burke, the criminal who is wanted here. I had to put that piece in just that we properly characterize him. So visiting communities, as I said before, they keep us grounded. Because when you go there, people, you don't have this big protocol of office, and it's not a control environment. Like APNU love to work in control environment. If you talk to most people, they didn't see them. The ministers would go, they would have a very small circle, they don't meet people, they pop into an area and come out back. When you go in that kind of environment, you get to talk to people firsthand and explain to them issues. Because many are led to believe that their communities are not getting their fair share. So if you go to Linden, they would say, oh, you're doing something in Berbice, we're not getting our fair share. When you go to Berbice, they're saying you're doing something in Linden or Georgetown because of the misrepresentation. We're working in all across the country. So, and we enjoy doing this too, because it's talking to people, listening to ordinary people. And that's why we don't have any fear of being too aloof, because people say, like one other thing, people want more money, wages and salaries and stuff, and that's true. I've gone to most of these community meetings. You know the first thing that people ask for? Roads. When are you fixing the road? Now, should we disregard the wishes of the people? And we have fixed over maybe 2,500 roads, community roads, since we got into office. I haven't even costed that as yet to have people say, oh, where's all money going? Remember, we just costed one at 70 billion for 4 initiatives. These 2 alone are 30 billion. These two that are funded from the local budget, the road to Diamond and the crane to the Bridge Road. But when you look at the 2,500 road, that runs into tens of billions of dollars. That's the first thing people ask about. And then they would ask for things like, well, in few cases like jobs, and that's why we responded to the part-time jobs. And then they would talk about maybe, oh, the hospital, the doctor doesn't go there on time, things like those. But the primary concern of almost everybody, should we not listen to them and fix their road? So that is a big issue. Yes, please. And then we come. Yes. Yes. Exxon will be moving to. On the audit, I have not been advised of that, but if that comes to my desk, I'll let you know. And so I don't want to just give life to rumors. At this stage, it's in that domain until I receive a notification. It might be factual, but let's see until I see it in black and white. So that's one. Yes, it's always a concern, but not just there. From the government agencies, we're losing staff to the private sector, to Exxon, but we're losing staff to the other private sector, and some of the private sector losing staff to the government, because sometimes our pay is more lucrative than the private sector too, in the state sector. So they are losing sometimes the government. So people have labor mobility now, and it's where they have choices. You can't hold people like in bondage. You know, you have to keep training, and that is why we have 17,000 people now on government scholarship, online scholarship alone. 17,000 people studying. That was one of the things too. They don't see that as an improvement. That's 3 years, 17,000. Starbuck couldn't even mention that in their editorial. Less than 1,000 in the period Apnu was there. Nearly 30,000 house lots developed. They didn't see that positive, with practically no housing. But it's all negative. So 17,000 people studying. We keep training. You have people with labor mobility, as I said. The biggest problem we have with labor mobility, though, is moving from the regions, geographic labor mobility, not between agency. We're trying to get people to come. And when they do come, they don't want to, they want housing here, so they apply for a house lot here. I met a youngster on Emancipation Day from Dartmouth. So he came and he's working now in oil and gas. So he told me he's applied now for a plot of land in Region 4 because he's planning to move. So that is going to be an issue too. We have to find a way of driving more economic activities into these regions now, because some people move, but others don't want to move. Like he took the decision to move, but he still has issues with rentals and stuff like that coming to work in Georgetown. So you're going to continue to have labor mobility. There is no position in the government where we can restrict that. And it's hard to outcompete the alternate. And it's a right that citizens should have. This is something that should be celebrated too. There was a time when people felt they had no option but to stick with one job, for life. People now find I can do better in another place, then they move on. So those are the two issues. Yes. Yeah, sure. What? Okay. Yeah, the Commonwealth reports are good as guideline because they're done by specialists, but they're general. What we did, we hire practitioners and people specific in the industry. So when we did the plans that are submitted before we license new operations, we have several. We do an internal review, and then we have other external specialists who review these documents. That one thing you would note is that they're often general. Like I saw a McIntyre report, the headline basically praising the government of Guyana for its stewardship of the oil and gas sector, but often, because it speaks about the patience that we exercise, not using the money until we reform the NRF, which is what we did under the government, but it cautions about being careful with the Dutch disease, the same McIntyre report, and they caution about the Dutch disease. Then we're being pushed by Norton and the Stabroek and everybody to do the things that they want that will cause the Dutch disease. And then they think that they're representing the best in political and economic thought. That's the contradiction. And so that editor, the article is great. The IMF position is very complimentary. And then I see a headline that distorts the whole tenure of the article. The same thing with the Commonwealth. They give broad guidelines, and then because they're not involved in a specific field development plan or anything of that nature. That the principles. Feasibility, you see, you have to go to the feasibility studies now are done by the oil and gas companies because they have to raise the funding for that. And the funding is of a massive magnitude. We've gone through this before. One project could cost $10 billion, twice the size of all of our accumulated savings in our banking system. So it's money that they either come from equity or loans. That's how projects are funded. So their financiers have to make sure that they're going to get a decent return on these projects. So that's on a financial feasibility side. On the technical feasibility, they are the ones presenting the proposals to us. Now, when those come in on the technical side, that's where the review takes place, on the technical feasibility. That's why we're strengthening the Petroleum Activities Bill and the PSA to get more information. Information and prior information would allow us to in a greater way, have a say over or examine the feasibility studies. But normally an investor, if you're doing a mine here or you're coming in to do an agricultural project. You do your feasibility study. It's your investment, your money that you're putting in. The government, if you may come to government and say, I need the following concessions, so a lot of people apply to the GRA. But if you fail, if you lose your money, we're not out of pocket. We're not putting in a cent into these ventures. We're not out of pocket. So assuming that the price of oil goes now to $28 a barrel, the losses would be borne by the company themselves. So they have to be cautious on that. So I don't see it why it's any different for the oil and gas sector. It's the people who risk the money that they're bringing to the project, and these are huge sums of money. They have to, trust me, they will ensure that these projects, they can make money from them too. What I'm more concerned about is that the government gets a greater take from their activity, and this is what we've secured through the PSA, the new PSA. And yes, the final one.
There are some fears that if the price drops, we may not be able to service these loans that we take on. Can you confirm that the country will be able to release debts with rapidly?
Yes, because as I pointed out now, that and I don't want to go back through that again, our debt to GDP ratio and our debt service to revenue ratio are among the lowest in the world today as I speak. In spite of all the borrowing. Our debt to GDP ratio and debt servicing to revenue ratio are among the lowest in the entire world today as I speak. Yes, please.
Just to follow up on the labor shortages, so to speak, there's a lot of
I didn't get that.
follow up on the labor issue.
Oh, the labor. Yes, the labor.
I'm just curious, we hear about the shortage of labor, but at what point will the government seriously consider it if it hasn't already started allowing labor?
Sure. So I explained this before, so it's worth repeating it. That there are a large number of people who are trying to bring in laborers. We've been very cautious. They have in giving large-scale permits. They have to demonstrate a need, and they have to now show that the project will be adversely affected before we give the permission. In some parts of our country and in certain skill types, we have shortages. So in Region 4, finding some laborers is a very difficult task for many people. And then for some skill types like plumbing, carpentry, masonry, some like drivers, heavy-duty equipment operators, etc. People can't find those to work. A lot of skilled laborers. But the situation is not the same in other regions of the country. So we don't want to do allowing a large numbers to come here when our own people in other parts of the country still may be looking for a job. But because they don't have the same level of economic activities in those regions, then they can't find one as it. That is why we're bolstering this with the part-time job. We're focusing on training people. We're urging them to be trained. We're urging labor mobility. We have spoken to a lot of the contractors here. We're saying, can't you build facilities to keep them, like if someone comes from Berbice or Linden or Essequibo or Region 1, so that they have accommodation here, decent accommodation, and then maybe on the weekend they go back to work. So we are trying to work through that problem to try to see if we can promote greater labor mobility. At some point in time, I believe we're going to absorb all of that. We're trying also to bring women into the workforce, and that's why we think the part-time job is a stepping stone for many women. Urban women tend to be working more, but rural women, a lot of rural women have not been working. Many of them were homemakers or just simply at home. And therefore, the part-time job is a good stepping stone for them to have an income, start coming out to work, even for a few days. And then, of course, to study. It gives them like an income to do more studies. So we're trying to expand the supply of labor through training, aggressive training program. We're building a massive training school at Port Morant, the scholarship program, the BIT. Supply, increase, and more skilled people, bringing in new entrants into the labor market. And then we know the demand is growing, and then allowing selective projects to bring in their labor, like the road projects. They're complaining they have a timeline to deliver the road, 2 years, the Indian company or the Chinese company on the bridge or someone else. They bring in laborers to work on those projects. So at some stage we get to a point where all of our people are working, and then we'd have to have a different sort of immigration policy. Now people are worried, like UAE and Qatar and the others, where the original population is like 10% of the total population in the country, the people of the country. We're not going to get to that, so don't let Norton quote me on this. I'm just giving an example. Next thing the Kool-Aid gang would say, I'm saying we're bringing in lots of foreigners. So we now need, but those countries have differentiated between their citizens and people who are resident in the country. So they have like access to health care and other like social benefits, but you still have a differentiation of the people, or our people like Guyanese. So the biometrics and the ID card we're producing will have 2 cards. One for citizens of Guyana. That is, we will have a different kind of card, and then one for residents in Guyana. So they have equal rights in terms of access to education and health and all of that. We make sure we provide that. But there's a differentiation between our people, and we, at any time, we can know what those differences are and stuff. And if people are coming in for a limited time period, those will, once you swipe that card, it will go back to their immigration records and to the work permit records, which will be separately tabulated. You can swipe the card, and then it takes you into like your GRA, your driver's license would have the same unique number. It will take you into Social Security, all of that. So if we're sharing a grant now, and we have to deposit it in people's account, not to give them money physically, we emerge into that. You can then deposit in the account of citizens versus non-citizens. So that is where we're evolving, and that's why we're moving parallel to do the biometrics of everyone who's living in the country with those cards that would start the differentiation. Planning for that future, which may happen 5 years from now, but where we'd have to have a more liberal policy on immigration, but only after our own people are working around the country. They have jobs, good paying jobs, etc. That's the plan.
Specifically on concerns raised in the PAC from GRA, you mentioned that some of this work is being constrained by not having those highly technical staff. At what point do you consider bringing highly technical persons to support?
Yes, no, but if the GRA comes to us and say, we can't get X work done because we don't have this Y skill person, then we will deal with that immediately. But we don't want to do it on a blanket basis. They have to demonstrate a need and a very specific need. Because the moment we do it on a blanket basis, you bring down 10 people here to work at GRA, 5 of our local guys would show up and say, hold on a minute, we are qualified, we can do the job. And then we get caught in between. So we need to be very careful about this. So if GRA, if the Commissioner General goes to the Minister of Finance and say, my work is being affected because I don't have skilled Guyanese, and I need 3 persons of a skilled nature, and here is the CV, right? For the persons that to allow me to complete this task. If we can't find them here, we'd have to bring them in. Okay, but it must be specific. Yeah, sure. Those are issues that the President is dealing with, but let me just say I spoke with the President, so on Monday, the mayors and the others would be sworn in, and on Wednesday, the COI for Madia. Next Wednesday. Monday, the mayors would be sworn in, and Wednesday. But the other things are in the President's portfolio. Yes. The consultations, they haven't started as yet. As I said before, we focus heavily on core issues. We know people spend a lot on electricity, on water, and these things. So, and like data too, when we remove the taxes. And then look at core interventions. So, cost of living is not just about, say, prices. It's also for production. Because if someone was earning, and if you look at the interventions we did with some of the farmers, they had a higher fertilizer price in the past when oil prices skyrocketed. So that pushed up their cost of production. If it pushes up their cost of production, their net income at the end of the day is lower. Because of a lower net income, because of changing prices, their ability to sustain livelihoods is diminished. So if you assist with the offsetting the cost of production, then they still maintain their original, their net income doesn't get affected, and then they can also do well. But we will do that, I think, very soon. We'll launch the consultations. Okay, so New Amsterdam, I met with a larger community group there, but including our councillors, candidates, and again, they told me about there are no rumors in the area. A lot of that sort of thing, they're going around to people, spreading rumors and all of that stuff. So we talk about expectations and how they will have to work in future, that they have to be out there, assist people as far as possible. Not everyone can get assisted at the same time. People have to go through a process, people get help in different ways, etc. And then I met also with the councillors from across Berbice, all 22 local government bodies, and we discuss again attitudes. I said to them, We have had a lot of negatives from people on the ground. Some didn't even want to vote. They will vote for the party at the general elections, but they may not want to vote for an individual at the local government elections or people on the list because of attitude. They just don't treat people well. And personal attitudes matter in local government issues. So we talk a lot about that and about the commitment to consult with people in their communities. We're going to be spending resources. Remember, we promised people across the country on money, the infrastructure. We have a large number of roads being done in Linden, in New Amsterdam, on the East Coast, every part of the country, West Coast, Region 5, we allocated a billion. So that they must be involved. We share the bills of quantities with them so that they have to be involved and to oversee the quality of the work in many of the communities. That's the kind of engagement. But to say to them they have to live up to the expectations that we caused in people, where we said they would be accountable, etc. That was basically what it was about. Yes, Dennis.
In terms of your manifesto promises in relation to the private sector, what steps have you taken to involve civil society forward in the process of compliance and accountability? And also, why do you not go to the next stage, including the province, definition of renegotiation? Because still in the manifesto it says, immediately engage oil and gas companies and contract administration
slash, yeah.
And
so
where are we now? Where's your acquisition now currently with verifying production?
with
Verifying production.
Okay, so let me start with the last one. I made it clear, Dennis, you may have missed my earlier positions at the press conferences, that we will get past the core reforms first, that we were focusing on the core reforms, the PSA, the petroleum, the Local Content Act, the auction, the Petroleum Activities Bill. When we've upgraded the architecture, we will then move to operational compliance issues. So the new PSA will strengthen our ability to manage, because it will force the oil and gas companies and the law too that we're passing today, that will be tabled today, that they will force the oil and gas companies to submit more timely data, so we can have a better real-time sort of picture of the industry. On issues relating to production verification, we said that Exxon is building an operational center as part of the head office. They have a fiber optic cable coming in. We may have to get an access to the fiber, or in the short term, we'd probably use satellite technology to have our independent measuring of the flows and everything else. Discharge, water, oil flows, etc. Every one of those FPSOs. So I said that's stage 2. That is verification of the numbers that they give to us. Then we have our own operating center. But it will cost money too. These things cost money. So I explained that before. We need to get past the framework reforms, and then we'll come to that. So that's our position at this point in time. Civil society. Now, the civil society is part of the compliance mechanism on the NRF. The civil society is, so we had 22 organizations, I think, under the APNU bill. And I saw one man said, that Starbuck editorial, that he'd never seen such a top-heavy bureaucracy in the world. We have reduced it to 9 civil society organizations, from the labor movement, from the professional bodies, from the religious bodies, these are, and I think, and from the private sector. These have to meet and produce, along with the board of the NRF, an annual report which will be tabled in the Parliament. Now you have to recall that every cent that comes to the budget from the NRF is formula-based, and it has to, before it's spent, it has to go through an appropriation project, any project funded under that. So that already is before the Parliament. So that is how there is still a body in the NRF, a civil society body, that has a very important role to play in oversight over the NRF. And the third issue is renegotiation. So we had, that's why I told you slash, better contract management slash renegotiation. The slash was there that if they bulk on, so we put that in our manifesto. But if you look at our public statements, and 3 weeks before the elections, I was asked at a press conference, will the PPP be renegotiating the Starborough block? And there was an unequivocal answer, no. And you can go back and check that. That was before the 2020 elections. The slash there, just imagine if Exxon had refused to give us the free gas still, the free gas for power plant. And they were unwilling to address the local content law and all of that stuff. We said we need to get better contract management, means we had to get more, and also getting more from the contract means these other projects. The local content project that brings more, we're estimating that within another 3 years, about $1 billion of spending per annum will be with Guyanese business. That gas to energy project will pay back for itself basically at the rate of gas. Maybe now it's come down a little bit lower. That will pay back for itself, but we practically have the electricity for free. And now is a substantial, that's 300 megawatts of power. Practically have it for free. And that would allow us to cut the price of electricity by 50%, bringing about a huge benefit to our people, equivalent to maybe 70, 80 million US dollars per annum. If you double that, because it's 300 megawatts, that's at 140 megawatts, it should be over 100 million US dollars by us cutting the price of electricity by 50%. If we were to sell 300 megawatts at the current rate, and by selling it at half of its price, we will save Guyanese consumers over 100 million US dollars per year. So that's benefit to our people. But all of these things get lost in the doctrinaire kind of debate. Oh, we're building a power plant, we have an international obligation. All of that gets lost. So we're saving enormous amount. But that's why we put that slash there. And so when people say, oh, we're reneging on our commitment, I made a firm, unequivocal answer. This was 3 weeks before the national elections. Our position has not changed. on this matter, our position. We left all of our options open. That's why we left our option position, but that was an unequivocal answer. We dealt with that already. I'm not going to... So no, it's not just sanctity of contract, is the same net zero. So let me go back, Davina, one more time. We had a window, a closing window globally for fossil fuel. Most countries in the world, the developed countries in the world, they're increasing their output of fossil fuel. I've just pointed out to the UK, over 100 million exploration licenses a couple of weeks ago. They've given to their people. They need the fossil fuel, they're making a lot of money, notwithstanding net zero. We believe in a global commitment, we believe in decarbonizing. So we have to make sure that these resources are extracted, and that is why I said our depletion policy is to get as much out as quickly as possible. And it sounds crude on the face of it, but it is in the context of net zero. And therefore, we need to transfer these assets that are there on the ground in the form of this natural resource called oil into financial assets as quickly as possible. Because at some stage, if we have net zero, they can't be utilized any longer globally. And so if you now engage in a renegotiation, that's the end of every single oil project, the future projects, because nobody, until the terms are settled, there will be no new investments in the sector. We will kill. Huh? No. Well, let me finish. So we are just launching a bid round. We will get probably nobody in the bid round. It will kill momentum at a particular time is important. Now, people are vying. 80-something countries are vying for oil and gas money around the world. We're the only ones, or not small, not we. A small group of people think we shouldn't do this. So Exxon, I don't know who told you that from Exxon. You go and ask Exxon if they will continue, or any global investor, anybody who has money. If you have a dispute with your partner on the other side that is in charge of regulation and ensuring that you have that they act per contract, whether you will pump $40 billion into the industry. And $40 billion is 8 times what we have in our banking system, aggregate of savings. So we made it clear. We've explained it hundreds of times before, why it is crucial that you now maximize your investment. You saw what the UN Secretary General and the others are saying? Do not invest any more in fossil fuel infrastructure, because it will be stranded. They're saying to the world, don't fund fossil fuel infrastructure. If the world doesn't fund it, we're stuck with all the oil potential in the world, but nobody funding it, like Suriname and many African countries. If that happens, there's an active move globally to prevent investments taking place. We have to maximize the investment flow. 80 countries are trying to get investment flowing into their country. And ultimately, once the infrastructure is built for the oil and gas sector, we can then secure a place, not only up to maybe 2035, but even in a net zero scenario with 2050, them using 25 million barrels per day, that's the IEA estimated, down from 100 million barrels. because of our low production costs and light sweet crude, we'd still secure our place long into the future. That is, but time is of essence here because we're at the cusp of changes that are bigger than us globally. And people sometimes don't have that global perspective of what's happening out there. When they try to raise, Gisby tried to raise $100 million from IDB to put in an infrastructure that's for the oil and gas sector, but could have had multiple use, and it got vetoed, much less to raise $40 billion. $40 billion with the possibility of your assets being stranded because of global environmental changes. So that is why we say, please look at the big picture. And sometimes that gets lost here in the petty squabble over issues. Yes? Anyone?
Dr. Jagdeo, at what time did your government accept the role, yourself and government accept the role that you play in the double standard in the media today? Because of the fact you go to painstaking on a weekly basis to come and dispel misinformation, while the government turns a blind eye to media houses like Kaichuni that has a radio station and owes the GNBA money, while they are putting out misinformation, while they allow us to put out misinformation. There are ways owes the radio station owes the government money. And the government is also simultaneously one of the biggest contributors, if not the biggest contributor to media entities in this country. So you're taking taxpayers' money, give it to entities that spread misinformation, create confusion. You come here every Thursday, continually answer the same questions. At what point in time will the government and yourself be responsible for this imbalance here?
So the GNBA has to deal with its regulatory functions, and that's separate from me here as a member of the executive and as General Secretary of the PPP. So I can't, because if the and I don't want to comment on GNBA and how it's pursuing its mandate. That should be dealt with at a separate state activity, not here. My job, as we said before, we believe in press freedom. There are lots of times we believe we're treated unfairly. I've gone through a lot of this stuff. You heard what I said. The distortions on a weekly basis, the vile lies that are told about the PPP every day and find themselves in the mainstream media, the mischaracterization of every single issue, the double standards like Patterson matter that you saw. Patterson, if a PPP person had done what Patterson did, where there's documentary evidence what he did, you want to have any clearer view, that person would have been mauled by now, totally by the media, but it practically went off as a non-event, and somehow the PPP is discriminating against it. So it's our duty. So all of that happens. But this happens in free societies too. And it would be immensely easier if we live like in North Korea, like this Christopher Jones was saying. But we live in a free country. And so whilst we will defend the right of the media to say what they want to say, we will robustly challenge them to. And sometimes that challenge is seen as being hostile, but it's not. We have to do our job and to point out where these distortions take place. And it sometimes it's frustrating, and it is like sometimes you just want to say, how could people be so stupid to believe some of these things? But you have to do it, and that's what political parties do and governments do. The fact that some of the media entities may not be in good standing, that's for another occasion, and that you can ask the GNBA to deal with that.
Dr. Jagdeo, if you are your part, government's biggest funder of media, you would expect when misinformation is put out there, they will look to educate the public, like the fact that every time the PPP is in government, there are more fires. And everybody knows why there are more fires when the PPP is in government.
Actually, that's something that that's one part of the Kool-Aid kind of mentality too, the fire bit. But if we give an ad to a media house, you're hoping that there would be balance, but you can't muzzle them editorially. And I think therefore, yes, it's true that in many cases that the government does fund a lot of the same media houses that are harassing every day, distorting stuff. But if you can't just give an ad and say, only because you get a government ad, you have to toe the government line. That's not how it works. And so I guess they'll continue getting the ads, but and I hope that the public, this is all back to the public. People can write whatever they want. The public. You know something about, and what I noticed too, like I was in Berbice recently, and at 2 gatherings where you had almost like 1,600 people combined. 3 said to me they read the newspapers. I asked by a show of hands. 3 read the newspapers. And that was really shocking to me. 3, I said, where do you get your news from? 3 persons. 1 gathering, nobody. And if you don't believe me, I have the recording of it, I can show you. So people have to, the people who are imbibing the news, they have to be discerning. And that's what I try to talk to people about, that educate yourselves. Don't listen to this thing, like the same nonsense you said to me just now about people saying that every time PPP is in office, there is a fire. That we burn down places to rebuild them and give contractors favorable to us their job. Now, as though we don't have enough things to build, if we want to give contractors favorable to us, we could go and build schools everywhere. There's big demand for schools and everything else. But the reason, they don't look at the converse of what they're saying. Why, when the PPP is in office, you are burning? Because we're not a slow fire, more fire party. You know which is the slow fire, more fire party. And so they say that, but the Kool-Aid people actually build it. They said, we burn up this Stelling, and then they didn't realize to give people a job, right, to build back this Stelling at Reed and Hope. Then they didn't realize it's the private boats that got burnt up too there. Just a bunch of lies, and people actually believe this sort of thing. But critic, the thing is that we can't take away the muzzle the media here. You can't muzzle them. I expect, of course, if they're utilizing public funds, that they have a responsibility to people, not to distort. But again, that's up to their editorial policy. Like Kaichor News, the editorial policy is Glenn Lal. The editorial policy is Glenn Lal. If he wakes up and one morning he's crazy, then you get a crazy thing the day. Anyhow, yes, Davina. In the goal? Yeah, it's ongoing. It's ongoing. No, it's ongoing. I don't want to tell you that. It's ongoing. I know about that. It's ongoing. Okay? It's ongoing. Anything else? Right. Thank you. Thank you very much.